I waited 15 years to get my revenge, and when the day finally arrived, every second was worth it. It was just like I imagined. Or even better. The long shadow of revenge. I waited 15 years to enact my revenge, and it was exactly as I had imagined it. When people think of revenge, they often visualize a violent, spontaneous act, a confrontation, a moment of brutal justice. But true revenge isn't impulsive, it's patient. It lurks in the shadows, growing stronger while the adversary feels secure. I wasn't always this way, so calculating, patient, and cold. There was a time I was Catherine Porter's bright-eyed niece, full of dreams of changing the world through innovation. My Aunt Catherine was a brilliant engineer who had built Porter Industries from a humble garage into a technological powerhouse. She took me in after my parents died, teaching me the workings of circuits before I could even tie my shoes. "Diana," she'd say, "in business and in life, integrity is everything. Without it, none of this matters." I believed her. I was 16, idealistic, and she was my hero. Then she died. "Car accident," they said. I remember Malcolm, her brother, putting his arm around me at the funeral. "She would have wanted you to be strong," he whispered, and I nodded through tears, grateful for his support. 2 months later, Malcolm took control of the company. Catherine's patents suddenly appeared under his name. Her innovations became Porter's breakthrough technologies. Her photograph disappeared from the company lobby. The story rewritten. I was young but not stupid. Something didn't add up, but I had no proof, no power, and nowhere to go. Malcolm became my legal guardian. He enrolled me in boarding school, the best education money could buy. After that, I saw him maybe twice a year. When I graduated from university, with a double major in business and computer science, Malcolm offered me an entry-level position at Porter Industries. "It's what Catherine would have wanted," he said, his smile not reaching his eyes. Family looking out for family. I accepted, not because I believed him, but because I needed to know what had truly happened to my aunt. My plan began the day Malcolm introduced me to the board of directors as his assistant. I had drafted the entire business proposal that saved his company from bankruptcy, staying up 3 nights straight crunching numbers while he entertained clients on his yacht. When the board applauded, Malcolm stepped forward and took a bow. I didn't say a word. I just smiled and refilled everyone's water glasses. "That's why I hired her," Malcolm told them later. "Brilliant with the details, but knows her place." That night, I typed out my resignation letter, but I never sent it. Instead, I created a new folder on my laptop, titled Patience. For 15 years, I made myself indispensable to Malcolm. I managed his calendar, knew his passwords, handled his personal affairs. When his wife left him, I organized the divorce settlement. When his son needed rehab, I found the facility and negotiated the price. When he needed to hide money from the IRS, I set up the offshore accounts. Every year that passed, I accumulated more evidence, more secrets, more leverage. The first 2 years were the hardest. Malcolm was wary around me, keeping me at arm's length. I worked 16-hour days, proving my loyalty, containing my rage when he took credit for my work. At night, I returned to my small apartment and meticulously document everything I observed. By the 3rd year, Malcolm had grown comfortable enough to leave me alone with sensitive files. That's when I found the first real proof, an old police report buried in a box of miscellaneous documents. It detailed Catherine's car accident, driver's side impact at 65 miles per hour, instantaneous death. What caught my eye was a handwritten note in the margin, evidence of tampering with brake lines, inconclusive. Case closed per directive. My hands shook as I photographed the report. That night I cried for the first time since Catherine's funeral. Not from sadness, but from vindication. I wasn't crazy. Something had happened to her. But one document wasn't enough. I needed more. In the 4th year, Malcolm promoted me to executive assistant after I saved a major client relationship. He botched a presentation, insulting the client's product vision. After he left, I stayed and worked through the night, redesigning their proposal. When the client signed a 7-figure contract, Malcolm took full credit, but he also gave me a key to his office. "You've earned it," he said, dropping the key into my palm. "I need someone I can trust." I nodded. The weight of the key was nothing compared to the weight of my patience. That key unlocked more than his office. It opened filing cabinets, storage rooms, and eventually, a hidden safe behind the double bottom of his desk drawer. Inside was a USB drive labeled CP Final. I waited a week before taking it, creating a perfect replica to leave in its place. When I finally viewed its contents in a coffee shop 3 towns away, I nearly vomited. The drive contained video footage of Malcolm arguing with Catherine in her office. The timestamp showed 11:43 p.m., the night before she died. "It's my company, too," Malcolm screamed, his face contorted with rage. "I deserve those patents." Catherine stood firm. "You didn't design them. You didn't build them. You didn't invest a cent of your own money. The board will never approve." The video cut out as Malcolm lunged at her. I stayed in that coffee shop until closing, the footage replaying on a loop in my head. I now had a motive, but still not enough proof to take legal action. Malcolm was too powerful, too connected with local authorities. If I moved too soon, I would lose everything. So I waited and I planned. The 5th year brought an unexpected complication. James Porter, Malcolm's 16-year-old son. Malcolm's ex-wife had reached her breaking point, dropping the troubled teenager on his father's doorstep before moving to Europe with her new husband. "I need you to handle this," Malcolm said to me, gesturing to James, who stood sullenly in the corner of the office. "Find him a good school. Keep him out of trouble. Keep him away from me." I expected to hate James on principle. Instead, I found a perceptive, wounded boy struggling under the weight of his father's indifference. "He never talks about her, you know," James said one day as I drove him to a therapy appointment. "Who?" "My aunt. Your mom." I gripped the steering wheel. "Catherine wasn't my mother. She was my aunt." James shrugged. "Sorry. Dad never mentions her, so I just assumed." He fell silent, staring out the window. "What do you know about her?" I asked carefully. "Not much. Just that she was smart. Really smart. And that she died in an accident." He turned to look at me. "Dad got rid of all her photos after she died." "Not all of them," I said before I could stop myself. That night, I showed James the only photograph I had of Catherine, the two of us at my high school graduation. She was beaming, her arm around my shoulders, her whole face lit up with pride. James studied it for a long time. "You look like her," he said finally. "People used to say that all the time." He carefully handed the photo back. "Why do you work for my dad? You don't seem to like him much." The question caught me off guard. For a split second, I considered telling him everything. Instead, I said, "It's complicated." "Complicated or really complicated?" he asked with a hint of a smile. "Really complicated." James nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Most things are, once you look closely." By year 7, I had earned Malcolm's complete trust. I managed his schedule, screened his calls, and prepared his presentations. Behind the scenes, I built my case, documenting financial irregularities, recording conversations, and building connections with key players in the industry. I also became James's de facto guardian. I attended his teacher meetings, helped him with college applications, and bailed him out when he experimented with drugs and alcohol, episodes I carefully concealed from Malcolm. "Why do you care?" James asked me once after I picked him up at 2 a.m. from a party gone wrong. "It's not your job to deal with my mess." "Perhaps I see something in you worth saving," I replied. "Or maybe you're just really good at your job," he said, his words slightly slurred. "Taking care of the Porter family's problems." I didn't answer, keeping my eyes on the road. The truth was more complicated than either option. In some twisted way, helping James felt like honoring Catherine. She would have wanted me to protect him, regardless of his father's sins. The 10th year brought a critical breakthrough. Malcolm, growing reckless with his success, began cutting corners on a new product line. When safety issues arose, he suppressed reports and fired whistleblowers. I documented everything while, publicly, I played the loyal lieutenant. "We need to delay the launch," I told him privately, showing him the test results. "These failure rates are dangerous." Malcolm laughed. "Since when are you risk-averse?" "We're announcing next week. The stock will soar. We'll fix the kinks in version 2, and no one will get hurt." "People could get hurt," I insisted. "These devices could catch fire under certain conditions." He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "You know what Catherine's problem was? She was too cautious, too ethical. It held her back." He pointed at me. "Don't make the same mistake." I nodded, while rising in my throat. That night, I anonymously leaked the safety reports to a trusted journalist. When the story broke, Porter Industries' stock plummeted. Malcolm was furious, ordering an internal investigation to find the leak. I led the investigation myself, methodically eliminating suspects until only one remained, a low-level engineer with a history of complaining about management. Malcolm fired him personally as I watched from the doorway. Another sin added to my growing list. The fired engineer committed suicide 2 weeks later. The note he left simply read, "I didn't do it, but no one will believe me now." I almost gave up then, almost revealed everything I had. But it wouldn't have been enough to bring Malcolm down completely. He would have recovered, retaliated, and everything Catherine had built would have been lost forever. So I compartmentalized my guilt and refocused on the ultimate goal. The engineer became another ghost urging me forward. By year 12, James had graduated college and returned to work at Porter Industries, against my private advice. Malcolm installed him as Director of Innovation, a meaningless title that came with a corner office and no real responsibilities. "Keep an eye on him," Malcolm told me. "Make sure he doesn't interfere with anything important." But James wasn't as malleable as his father expected. He started attending meetings, asking questions, digging through old company patents, Catherine's patents. I watched him with growing unease, unsure if he was an ally or a threat to my carefully laid plans. "These patents," James said to me one night, spreading old documents across his desk. "The ones from before my aunt died. The engineering is incredible, so far ahead of its time." I kept my face neutral. Catherine was very innovative. "But the strange thing," he continued, is that the design approach changes completely after she dies. He showed me comparative diagrams. Look, these early ones are elegant, efficient. The later ones are basically brute force solutions. The same person couldn't have designed both. A chill ran down my spine. What are you suggesting? James leaned forward. I think my father took credit for my aunt's work after she died. And I think you know it. We stared at each other across the desk. The moment stretched, heavy with unspoken accusations and secrets. That's a serious accusation, I said finally. Not an accusation, an observation. James carefully gathered the patents, returning them to their folder. I just haven't figured out why you're still here if you know the truth. I left his office without answering. My carefully constructed world was tilting on its axis. James was getting too close, seeing too much. I needed to accelerate my timeline or risk exposure. Year 13 almost ruined everything. The SEC opened a preliminary investigation into Porter Industries' accounting practices based on an anonymous tip. Not for me, for once. Malcolm called an emergency executive meeting. Someone is trying to bring us down, he announced, his face flushed with rage. I want every department audited, every employee investigated. No one hides secrets from me. His eyes lingered on me for a fraction of a second too long. Had he found out something? Did he suspect me? I kept my composure, taking notes as if my heart wasn't threatening to beat out of my chest. After the meeting, Malcolm asked me to stay behind. Diana, how long have you been with me now? 13 years. Almost 14. I corrected automatically. He nodded, pouring himself a whiskey. You know, loyalty is a scarce commodity these days. I've always been loyal to Porter Industries, I said carefully. To Porter Industries, he repeated, swirling his drink. Not to me personally. I forced a smile. The company is your legacy, Malcolm. Your vision. They are one and the same. He studied me for a long moment, then suddenly grinned. Of course they are. That's why I'm promoting you to Chief of Staff. I need someone I can implicitly trust during this unfortunate investigation. The promotion wasn't a reward. It was a test. Malcolm was keeping me closer, looking for any sign of betrayal. I accepted with appropriate gratitude, while internally recalibrating my plans. That night, I received a text from James. Need to talk. Not at the office. Important. We met at a 24-hour coffee shop on the outskirts of town. James looked exhausted, his usual confidence replaced by a nervous energy. Dad's panicking about this SEC thing, he said without preamble. I've never seen him like this. The investigation will probably amount to nothing, I replied. The SEC investigates companies all the time. James leaned forward. He's destroying documents, Diana. I saw him feeding files into a shredder at 3 a.m. My pulse quickened. What kind of files? Old ones, from around the time Aunt Catherine died. James ran a hand through his hair. I managed to salvage a few pages. They don't make much sense on their own, but... He slid a folded paper across the table. It was a partial insurance document. A life insurance policy on Catherine Porter worth $10 million. The beneficiary was Malcolm. Did you know about this? James asked. I shook my head, the pieces clicking into place. The company had been in trouble before Catherine died. The cash infusion from this policy would have saved it, on top of gaining control of her patents. Pretty convenient timing, James added. James, this is dangerous territory, I warned. If your father thinks you're looking into this, what would he do? James's eyes locked onto mine. What aren't you telling me, Diana? I hesitated. Years of careful planning, warring with the urgent need for an ally. I believe your father may have been involved in Catherine's death, I said finally, and I've been gathering evidence for years to prove it. James didn't seem surprised. I suspected something like that. The way he never mentions her. The way her entire legacy was erased. I need more time, I said. A few more pieces of evidence. If we move too soon, he'll destroy everything. James reached across the table and took my hand. I want to help. She was my aunt and he's... He broke off, unable to finish the sentence. Your father. I completed for him. This would destroy him, James. Are you prepared for that? His expression hardened. If he had anything to do with her death, he destroyed himself a long time ago. I just didn't see it until now. We developed a careful strategy. James would continue as usual, playing the charming but somewhat incompetent son. I would accelerate my evidence gathering, using my new position as Chief of Staff to access the final documents I needed. The next 2 years were a delicate dance of deception. As Malcolm focused on fighting the SEC investigation, I methodically built my case. James provided cover, distracting his father with minor crises and going nowhere business proposals. I also made contact with Westridge Industries, Porter's main competitor. Through carefully encrypted communications, I laid the groundwork for my eventual move, providing just enough inside information to prove my worth without crossing legal lines. Malcolm promoted me to Chief of Staff, but introduced me to important people as practically family. He never noticed how I documented everything. Every questionable transaction, every mistress, every drunken confession. What would I do without you, Diana? He'd say, clapping me on the shoulder like a loyal dog. One night, after a particularly successful board meeting, Malcolm invited me to dinner. He was 3 martinis in when he leaned across the table and said, "You know, Catherine always said you had potential. Guess she was right about something." I kept my expression neutral. "You don't talk about her much." "Not much to say," he shrugged. "Brilliant, but naive. No killer instinct. Is that why the company struggled under her leadership?" I asked innocently. Malcolm snorted. Catherine was an engineer, not a businesswoman. She could design a perfect product, but she couldn't make the tough decisions. He leaned closer. "Sometimes progress requires sacrifice." I recorded every word. By year 15, all the pieces finally clicked into place. The SEC investigation had uncovered financial irregularities, but nothing catastrophic. Malcolm had weathered the storm, emerging more arrogant and invulnerable than ever. The final piece came from an unexpected source: Malcolm's former chauffeur, now retired and diagnosed with terminal cancer. I had kept in touch with him over the years, sending Christmas cards and occasional gifts. When he called asking to see me, I drove to his hospice care facility immediately. "I should have said something years ago," he confessed, his voice barely a whisper. "But Mr. Porter paid for my daughter's college, paid my wife's medical bills. I convinced myself it wasn't my business." "What wasn't your business, Henry?" His eyes filled with tears. "The night Miss Catherine died, I drove Mr. Malcolm home. He was furious, yelling into his phone about patents and board votes. When I dropped him off, he told me to wait 30 minutes then leave, whether he came out or not." Henry grabbed my hand. I heard them arguing inside, then a crash. When he came out, his knuckles were bloody. "Did you tell the police?" Henry shook his head. "Mr. Malcolm said it was a family matter. The next morning, we heard about the car accident." He closed his eyes. "But I serviced Miss Catherine's vehicles myself. Those brakes were perfect." I recorded his statement, had it notarized, and added it to my evidence file. The final piece. On the 15th anniversary of my joining the company, Malcolm threw a small office party, cheap champagne and a supermarket cake with my name misspelled. "To Diana," he toasted, "the backbone of this organization." Everyone clapped. I smiled. "Actually," I said, my voice steady, "I have an announcement too." Malcolm looked surprised. I'd never interrupted him before. "I've accepted a position as CEO of Westridge Industries." The room went silent. Westridge was our biggest competitor. Malcolm chuckled nervously. "You can't be serious." "I start Monday," I replied, sliding an envelope across the table. "My resignation, effective immediately." His face turned red. "You can't just—" "I just did." I stood. "And Malcolm, I'm taking the Coleman account with me." The Coleman account accounted for 60% of the company's revenue. Malcolm's face went from red to white. "You wouldn't dare. That's corporate espionage." I smiled. "No, Malcolm. It's business." As I walked out, I felt 15 years of accumulated rage and humiliation transform into something powerful, something calculated. Malcolm called 17 times that night. I didn't answer. James texted me once. "It's begun. Be careful." On Monday morning, as I walked into the gleaming Westridge headquarters as their new CEO, Malcolm was waiting for me in the lobby. His expensive suit couldn't hide how disheveled he was. 3-day stubble, bloodshot eyes. "Diana, please," he said, taking a step toward me. "Let's talk about this." 2 security guards moved to intercept him, but I held up my hand. 5 minutes, I said. In my office. We rode the elevator in silence. Malcolm would open his mouth, then close it again. For the first time, he seemed unsure of himself. When we reached the top floor, his eyes widened in awe at the view from my corner office, twice the size of his. "Sit," I said, gesturing to a chair opposite my desk. "Diana, whatever they're paying you, I'll double it." His voice trembled. "Triple it." I laughed. A real laugh. The one I'd been holding in for 15 years. "This isn't about money, Malcolm." "Then what?" "Recognition. I'll make you a partner. Anything you want." I sat down and opened my laptop. "Do you remember Catherine Porter?" His brow furrowed. "My sister." "What does she have to do with?" "Catherine Porter wasn't just your sister," I interrupted. "She was also my mentor, my hero." Malcolm scoffed. "Old history. What's your point?" "My point is, I know what happened the night before her accident." I swiveled my laptop so he could see it. Your chauffeur was very thorough in his statement. The color drained from Malcolm's face as he saw Henry's notarized testimony. "Henry's dying," I continued. "He has nothing to lose by telling the truth now." "That old fool is confused," Malcolm stammered. "It was years ago. His memory's failing." "Perhaps, but the physical evidence isn't." I clicked to the next document. The police report with the note about the tampered brake lines. "Nor are the financial records showing you were nearly bankrupt before her death." Another click. "Or the insurance policy naming you as the beneficiary." Another click. "Or this." The final image was the contents of the USB drive. Malcolm lunging at Catherine, his face contorted with rage. "You've been planning this for years. All this time you've been learning from me." "And me," I finished. Watching you destroy people, take what wasn't yours, erase those who stood in your way. What do you want? He asked, his voice barely audible. Justice. Money. Then name your price. I leaned forward. You still don't understand. This isn't a negotiation. It's a reckoning. I pressed the intercom. Send them in. The door opened and 3 people walked in, an SEC investigator, the largest shareholder of Porter Industries, and James. Malcolm's eyes widened in shock at the sight of his son. James, what are you doing here? Choosing a side, James replied quietly. The right side. The next hour was a systematic dismantling. The SEC investigator detailed the expanded investigation, now targeting Malcolm personally. The shareholder explained how the board had voted to suspend him, pending criminal charges, and James outlined how he would take temporary leadership of Porter Industries during the transition. This is a coup, Malcolm snarled. A conspiracy. No, I said calmly. These are consequences. As the others left, Malcolm remained seated, staring at me with pure hatred. 15 years, he said. You worked for me for 15 years, just for this moment. I worked for Catherine's company, I corrected. You were just sitting in her chair. Suddenly, he lunged, his hands reaching for my throat. I was ready, stepping aside as the security guards piled in, restraining him as he screamed obscenities. You're nothing without me, he bellowed as they dragged him away. I made you. No, Malcolm, I said, though he could no longer hear me. Catherine made me. You just gave me a reason. In the weeks that followed, everything unraveled for Malcolm Porter. The SEC filed formal charges. The board permanently removed him. Former associates disappeared, unwilling to be caught in his downfall. The carefully constructed facade of business genius crumbled, revealing the fraud beneath. I watched from a distance, running Westridge Industries, while quietly advising James on restructuring Porter. We met weekly for strategy sessions that often turned personal. Did you always know? James asked one night, referring to his father's involvement in Catherine's death. I suspected, I admitted, but suspicion isn't proof. I needed evidence that would stand up in court. And you spent 15 years getting it, he shook his head. That's dedication, or maybe obsession. I'm not sure there's much difference, I said with a sad smile. What happens now? He asked. Between our companies, I mean. That's up to you. Competition or collaboration. James considered this. Aunt Catherine believed in collaboration, in building things that matter. Yes, she did. The decision was made during that conversation, though neither of us explicitly stated it. In 6 months, we announced the merger of Porter and Westridge Industries under a new name, Catherine Porter Technologies. The day we unveiled a plaque dedicated to Catherine at our new research facility, I visited Malcolm in prison, where he awaited trial. He'd aged a decade in 6 months. Come to gloat, he asked, his voice hoarse. I placed a file folder on the table between us. I came to give you this. Inside were photos of James at the dedication ceremony, standing tall, smiling, healing. He's doing well, I said. Better than anyone expected. Malcolm's hands trembled as he touched the photos. Why are you showing me this? Because revenge wasn't everything I imagined it would be, I admitted. It didn't bring Catherine back. It didn't erase 15 years of working for a man I hated. Then what did you get out of it? His voice was bitter. Perspective, I stood. Your son is rebuilding what you destroyed. Not just the company, but the trust of everyone around it. Catherine's legacy lives on through him. Malcolm looked at the photos. Something akin to regret flickered across his face. She would have been proud of him. Yes, she would have. But not of me. He looked up, his eyes empty. I was her little brother. She always tried to protect me, even from myself. For a moment, I glimpsed the man he could have been. Vulnerable, human, capable of reflection. Then his expression hardened again. The company would have failed under her leadership. I saved it. By murdering her? I asked quietly. Malcolm flinched. It wasn't supposed to happen like that. We argued. She fell, hit her head on the corner of her desk. His voice dropped to a whisper. I panicked. The breaks were a precaution. The confession hung in the air between us. After 15 years, the truth spoken aloud at last. I'll make sure the prosecutor hears this, I said, standing. Wait. Malcolm's hand reached out, grabbing my wrist. Off the record, please. For James's sake. Gently, I pulled his hand away. James deserves to know the truth. All of it. As I turned to leave, Malcolm called out. He's not like me, you know. James. He's like her. I paused at the door. I know. That's why there's still hope for Porter Industries. Outside the prison, I sat in my car for a long time. The weight of 15 years suddenly lifted. My phone buzzed with a text from James. How did it go? I started the engine before replying. He confessed. It's over. 3 dots appeared as James typed, disappeared, then reappeared. Finally, thank you for seeing this through. For her. For all of us. I drove back to the office, Catherine's office, now my own, and stood before the portrait we'd hung on the wall. Catherine Porter, brilliant engineer, visionary founder, mentor. The plaque beneath it simply read, "Integrity is everything." Malcolm was sentenced to 20 years for Catherine's murder. The company thrived under our joint leadership, and slowly, I learned to define myself by something more than revenge. On the 5th anniversary of the merger, James and I stood on the balcony of our new headquarters, watching employees stream into the building. "Do you think she'd approve?" James asked. "What we built?" I thought of Catherine's brilliance, her integrity, her vision for technology that improved lives. "Yes," I said. "I think she would." "And you," he turned to me. "Now that it's done, was 15 years of your life worth it?" I considered the question carefully. Not for the revenge itself. That was hollow in the end. But for this. I gestured to the building, the people, the future we were creating. For the chance to finish what she started. To make something meaningful out of ruin. James nodded, understanding. To honor her legacy and build our own. When people talk about revenge, they imagine something violent and spontaneous. They don't tell you about the aftermath, how the satisfaction fades, how the emptiness returns. They don't tell you that true justice isn't about destroying someone else's life, but reclaiming your own, about transforming pain into purpose, about finally choosing to build instead of break. I waited 15 years to enact my revenge, and it was exactly as I had imagined it. But what came after, the healing, the creating, the living, that was something I never imagined at all. And it was better.